I'm not giving Mark a hug because he's been dissing California all evening. He lives in San Diego County. See, I live in Orange County. We're Republicans. So whenever they ask for extra money, we just say no. And then they say, well, what about the schools are going to go out of business? We say, sell them. We'll buy them. What about the parks? We got to close them. Sell them. We'll buy them. And when we had a tax, because they found themselves without money up in Sacramento, we said, oh, well, don't ask us. But anyway, I am glad to be here. I do like Texas. I didn't know that you have your own pledge to a flag, and I don't plan to learn it this evening. But I fly over Texas quite a bit because although I live in Southern California, about 3 years ago, I moved my entire operation from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C., the think tank that Mark told you about. And what's interesting, when I first left, my girlfriend's already thought I was in a midlife crisis because I went out there in the middle of the winter, not realizing that it actually does snow there and gets pretty cold weather. But when I first moved my operation there, I told one of my supporters that I felt like I moved from Sodom to Gomorrah. And he told me not to give Gomorrah such a bad name. But once they started putting the Nancy Pelosi billboards up over town, I said, oh, no, maybe I am in midlife crisis. I've actually done something pretty pathetic here. And then just recently, after the elections, I had it. And by December, I said, I'm going home. I'm going to go sit in my Habakkuk chair and just wait for God to speak to me. I'm not going to be there during inauguration. But I get a real blessing. As most of you know, things have been pretty pathetic in Washington lately. And immediately we started feeling what we knew would occur, that we wouldn't have too much progress on the issue of protecting innocent life in the womb. And I was just at a meeting recently, and the testimony of a young man who talked about abortion in his own life reminded me of that bumper sticker that we have all around town that says, one dead, one wounded. And I said, it's just not one wounded anymore. We're talking about, the 50 million dead babies, perhaps 40 million women directly impacted, and if men are promiscuous, maybe another 30 million men. And then if somebody else knew about it, you got another 70 million people. Half the country has been directly touched. And so when the new data came out last week, about most Americans now saying that they are pro-life. They're saying that, we thought about this a little bit deeper and we're not for abortion, but that same survey is showing that they're saying, but it's not that important in our lives anymore. And I started thinking, especially in the turn of this year, about the last time there was a big moral question on the table, that question of slavery. And I started thinking about 1850 and how they must have felt pretty discouraging times, I suppose, because, slavery was still in the country for about 70 years since its founding at that point. And less than 2% in the country actually owned slaves, but we had what we have today, a bunch of POBs, a bunch of people that say that they're personally opposed to it, but they don't want to push their views on others. Or I really want to know what comes behind that but, more so than I just don't feel comfortable talking about this. I want people to finish the sentence, I'm personally opposed, but what? But I don't mind others killing their grandchildren, but I don't mind the scars that are occurring in people's lives. And just in the last couple of weeks, just the stories that I've been hearing, just in the couple of weeks since getting back on the lecture circuit, I pretty much take off during the summer. Somebody mentioned my little grandson, Mr. James. So in the summers, I get to go to Los Angeles and visit with him a whole lot. And now he's 3.5 years old, so he's right at the age where I can teach him how to color on his mom's walls and tell his dad that he doesn't need a bedtime because Grandmommy said I don't. And besides, she said that if you ever mean to me, I can move to her house. And so, he's right at that age that he says it's so cute, and they have to say, why did you tell him that? And he gets his little timeout, and then he'll say the next little thing that I told him. But, when I think about the stories that I've heard, so after I got off of sitting around teaching him all of these wonderful things, and then getting back on the lecture circuit, I was up in Alaska, and a pastor, after I spoke, told me about the abortion in his life. And then I was at CareNet conference just recently, and a woman walked up to me after the book signing line. She was in the line, actually. It was a pretty long line, and then she walks up to me and hands me a picture of a very, very beautiful woman, a young lady, and she said, that was my daughter, and she died at an abortion table. And I didn't even know she was pregnant. And I think about, all of the opportunities that we've had in our society to do something, just in the last 10 years, to do something in Washington, D.C., and regardless of where you fall politically or what you thought about our last president, I just constantly remind myself of the two wonderful gifts that he did give us, Samuel Alito and Judge Roberts. And, and someone even reminded me this evening, that they met me before because we were there when he signed into law the ban on partial birth abortion. And, I remind myself that he comes from pretty good stock because his dad gave us Clarence Thomas. But after the election, and then coming up until this point, I'm constantly reminding myself of you. I'm constantly reminding myself that I get opportunity while things are really dark in Washington, D.C., and we know that one day God is going to answer the big moral question that may be legal but is not lawful in his eyes, and so he will do something about Roe v. Wade. What we have out in society today are just various people, just the decent people of this society that are in amazing communities doing the most wonderful work for him. And so I was very thankful to get the invitation to come to speak for the Texas Right to Life because, legislatively, we can make things happen. And, when you think about the last time we had that big moral question on the table, there were people that were in the legislature trying to do things just as the lieutenant governor got up and told us that he has done, and there are many in the room right now that look for different things that they could do, and it might not always be perfect what we're looking for, but it reminded me of when Benjamin Franklin, during the first Congressional Congress, walked into that Congress and told his colleagues that, we did forget something when we framed this big wonderful country, and he had a delegation of abolitionists with him, and Joe Ellis did an excellent job in a book called Founding Brothers describing that moment in our history, and in a chapter he called he called it The Silence. It's in the book Founding Brothers, and so I don't want to go into it too much detail because I don't have a lot of time, but just as a constant reminder that there are various people trying to do various work. The last time there was a big major question on the table. It may have been legal, but it wasn't lawful in God's eyes. And so who you remind me of